Good morning.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ward Patrick is here. Public Works.
Morning, Ward Patrick.
Good morning, Christina Shea.
Hello, this is Kate Marshall.
Yep.
Just a reminder to please mute your phone when not speaking. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to call to order today's meeting of the Executive Branch Audit Committee for Monday. I got the wrong one here. For Thursday, January 28th, 2021. Could I ask the clerk to take the roll, please?
Lieutenant Governor Marshall,
I'm here, and if the governor would like to change the date to like June or something, I'm good with it.
Yeah, really, you and me both.
Secretary Sagowski,
I'm here.
Treasurer Conine, Treasurer Conine, Controller Byrne,
Here.
Attorney General Ford,
I'm here.
Yes. We told that we.
Ms. DeLong,
All those in
Ms. DeLong, circle back around, Treasurer Conine,
Here.
okay. Ms. DeLong, not present.
Okay, well then I'm gonna have to wait to congratulate Ms. Long from being reappointed since she's not present. We'll have to wait on that one. Item number 2 is the public comment. This is a time set aside for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on today's agenda, please identify yourself for the record, and comments to be limited to 3 minutes. Do we have anybody in person in Carson City?
No, Governor.
We have no one in person in Las Vegas. Do we have anyone on the phone, or do we have any written public comments? I don't know who's monitoring this. Do we have anyone on the phone for public comment?
We hear none.
Do we have any written public comment?
No, Governor.
Okay, do I have we'll close public comment, item number 2, move on to item number 3, approval of the July 6, 2020 minutes. Do we have a motion on the minutes?
Yes, this is Barbara
Motion.
Gasky, and I would like to just make sure that we get that in the approval of the minutes that we get in there that our staff did talk to your staff, and there were very few minor corrections, and those are being taken care of. So I just want to make sure, as amended, that we make that comment. So I'll make the motion to approve as amended.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes as amended. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
We have a second. You want to announce who's making the motions in the second so that the clerk can get this recorded? I know the motion was made by Secretary Sagowski. Who seconded it?
Second by State Controller.
Controller Byrne, okay. We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Has Ms. DeLong joined us yet?
I just did. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay, if you could record Ms. DeLong as present, and we'd like to congratulate you on being reappointed to the board. So thank you for your commitment and your dedication and your willingness to devote so much of your time to these items. We appreciate it.
Most welcome, and thank you for reappointing me. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item number 4. We've got quite a few to present today. Department of Administration, State Public Works Division, Tenant Improvements and Building Maintenance.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, Governor and members of the committee. For the record, Heather Domenici, Audit Manager. Representing the State Public Works Division are Administrator Ward Patrick and Deputy Administrator Ron Cothran. We conducted an audit on tenant improvements and building maintenance. Our audit looked at ways to enhance the fiscal management of these categories. Improving fiscal management is necessary to ensure accurate accounting of expenditures and revenues, reduce delays, and comply with state guidelines. Tenant improvements are agency-requested projects facilitated by B&G and paid for by the agency. Building maintenance projects are funded through rent paid by the agency. To improve transparency, accountability, and fiscal management of these projects, we make two recommendations. First, we recommend B&G define Category 13 projects and establish policies and procedures to properly manage and estimate expenditures. B&G has no policy to clarify which types of expenditures should be charged to Category 13 tenant improvements versus Category 12 building maintenance. Over $200,000 of expenditures associated with these projects were improperly charged in 2018 through 2020. Additionally, $147,000 of agency-requested projects could not be completed in 2020 because B&G did not have sufficient budget authority and did not submit a work program to increase the authority. Defining Category 13 projects and establishing policies and procedures will ensure accurate accounting and reduce delays in completing agency-requested projects. Second, we recommend B&G use activity codes to track Category 13 chargebacks by agency. B&G currently tracks expenditures in Advantage by building rather than the agency to be charged back. This is inadequate because expenditures in Advantage cannot be reconciled to B&G's internal tracking report. The state budget manual requires expenditures to be accurately coded. B&G can code project expenditures by agency using activity codes in Advantage. This will ensure accurate reconciliation of expenditures to agency chargebacks and increase transparency over the process. We would like to thank the State Public Works Division for their time and input throughout the audit. We would be happy to answer any questions the committee may have at this time.
Okay, does anyone on the committee have any questions on this particular audit?
Yes, Governor, this is Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall.
Go ahead, Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make note, it appears that this particular audit does not reassess the rent calculation or deal with that issue. And I wanted to make a comment on the record that that issue needs to be looked at. We need to have some transparency in there. And I wondered if the auditors had any comment on that.
I would defer this question to our Administrator, Warren Lohman.
Hi, Warren.
Thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. We will add that to our audit plan, which we'll get to later on in the day here, and include that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Do I have any further questions on this audit? Okay, do I have we're not going to take motions to accept these audits, is that right?
We will add that to our audit plan, which we'll get to later on in the day.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Warren, I'm not hearing real well coming through here. I don't know if it's our audio system or my ears.
Governor, I believe he said that we would add that to our audit plan later on in the day.
Okay, so do you want me to take a motion now on this to accept this or no?
Those are on, I believe it's tab 9. A motion to add that would be appropriate at that time.
Okay, thanks. Moving on to the next one, Department of Public Safety. I'm getting a lot of background noise, so if you're not speaking, can you please mute your phones? I think that's one of the problems we're having. Thank you. Department of Public Safety, Division of Parole and Probation, caseloads.
Good morning, Governor and committee members. For the record, my name is Jeff Landerfelt. On the phone representing Division of Parole and Probation is Division Chief Tom Lawson. This audit focuses on aligning parole and probation's NPP's caseload ratios to improve operational effectiveness. NPP applies caseload ratios to offender forecasts during the budget process to determine staffing needs for case handling positions. The caseload ratios reflect the collective judgment of NPP's leadership as the workload necessary to achieve optimal outcomes for supervised offenders. Our audit found that caseload ratios established in the budget process are not always met. Rather, because of persistent vacancies in case handling positions, NPP often operates at caseload ratios higher than those deemed optimal. To that end, we make two recommendations. First, to track the caseload ratios based on actual staffing levels, and secondly, to develop a plan to improve retention and expand recruitment. Regarding the first recommendation, we note that although NPP does track caseload ratios at the unit level, they are not tracked in a manner that identifies where caseload imbalances exist at the officer level. DIA's analysis shows that not only are significant portions of officers handling excessive caseloads, but positions not intended to directly supervise offenders, such as sergeants and specialists, also carry direct supervision duties. Tracking caseload ratios at the officer level informs NPP leadership when adjustments are needed to achieve optimal caseloads. Operating at the desired caseload ratios is essential to striking the proper balance of offender supervision needed to reduce offender noncompliance. We also recommend NPP develop a plan to improve retention and expand recruitment. Research shows the law enforcement community is facing unprecedented recruitment challenges nationally, and creative approaches are needed locally to ensure adequate staffing of this critical public safety function. High turnover in case handling positions has a direct impact on the effectiveness of offender supervision, and results in an estimated $2.1 million annual loss of investment of trained officers. Documenting a plan to address recruitment and retention challenges as an integral part of the strategic plan will promote operational stability and ensure adequate resources are directed at hiring and retaining individuals with high potential for success with the organization. Because recruitment efforts are centralized for all DPS divisions, this recommendation will be implemented at the department level. We would like to thank NPP's leadership and staff for their time and input throughout this audit. We would be happy to answer any questions the committee may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on the caseloads audit?
Governor, this is Barbara Sagaski, Secretary of State.
Please, go ahead, Secretary.
Thank you. My question would be, did the measures that you, Governor, took to add increased pay, did that help with hiring or assist in this issue at all?
Madam Secretary, salary and other competitive compensation pressures are a key draw away from the state law enforcement community into municipalities and other law enforcement professions. So I would think that addressing salary increases would in fact help stem the tide of attrition. The agency may be able to speak to that. I know that there was a salary study done by DHRM, but as pointed out by the agency, there is some mismatching with regard to retirement benefits, which is sometimes cited as a key attraction to those officers leaving state service.
So would the answer be, Mr. Landerfield, that yes or no, that it helped with that measure?
Yes.
I'm just curious if it did. Okay, thank you
Yes.
very much, and thanks for your response.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else, board member, with a question on the caseload audit?
This is Trudy DeLong. I just have a quick question for the auditors.
did you look out to any other agencies or other states and find anyone who's doing this better than we are or has ideas? I know this is a thankless job, and I truly appreciate the difficulty it is to keep this staffed, but I was just curious if there was any look out to other agencies that might have ideas for us.
Well, the research that I looked at was actually, it's pretty vague. It kind of leaves it up to the local jurisdictions to figure out how they are going to best recruit and what those elements of their compensation package and other types of attributes that they could offer. But so really, the best practices are really up to the judgment of the agencies because there's so many elements that vary between states, the organizations, their pay structures, how they're organized, whether their parole and probation function is a separate from their from their parole function. Here they're combined. So there's a lot of elements to consider, and it really does deserve a lot of attention at the higher level to create these solutions and address the problems.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions? Okay, we'll accept that one, move on to the next audit, fiscal processes, Department of Corrections.
For the record, Heather Domenici, representing the Nevada Department of Corrections, or Ndoc, our Director Charles Daniels and his leadership team. Our audit focused on Ndoc's fiscal processes with the objective of developing recommendations to improve oversight of fiscal management and accounting practices. We found diminished oversight resulted in $29.2 million in reduced transparency over offender store fund expenditures, unnecessary work programs, and significant payroll costs. Moreover, Ndoc's contracting practices do not comply with state requirements. We make 4 recommendations for Ndoc to improve oversight of fiscal management and accounting practices. First, we recommend Ndoc increase oversight of the offender store fund. We found an average $11.9 million annually in offender store fund expenditures were administered through regulations adopted internally and not in conformance with the Administrative Procedures Act as required by statute. Ndoc can increase oversight of the fund by adopting regulations through the public administrative rulemaking process, which will comply with legislative guidance, include members of the public in the process, and ensure rules for administering fund expenditures conform with statutory authority and legislative intent. Second, we recommend Ndoc improve the accuracy of budgetary estimates and expenditure projections. Our review of fiscal Ndoc work programs processed in FY19 and 20 revealed an average of 64%, or $13.6 million, were unnecessary or misstated. The majority of these appeared to have been due to inaccurate projections or expenditure estimates, resulting in 84% processed for the same or similar purpose as other work programs. Ndoc can improve the accuracy of budgetary estimates and expenditure projections to eliminate these unnecessary and misstated work programs. Third, we recommend Ndoc ensure contracting practices comply with state requirements. Ndoc's contracting activities reduced transparency and did not comply with state requirements. Ndoc did not disclose a memorandum of understanding to state oversight bodies, which was used to improperly amend a $13.5 million state master services agreement for telephone services. Further, Ndoc did not obtain Board of Examiners approval for 3 cooperative agreements with the U.S. Department of Justice. Ndoc can ensure contract practices comply with state requirements through approval by state public oversight bodies, which will increase transparency in Ndoc operations and protect the interests of the state. Finally, we recommend Ndoc improve oversight over personnel and payroll practices. Diminished oversight over Ndoc personnel and payroll practices increases costs to the state by an average $3.7 million annually. Review of payroll registers and accounting records revealed misstated personnel costs recorded in budget accounts and significant overtime and paid administrative leave costs. Ndoc can improve oversight over personnel and payroll practices by assigning pay location codes, obtaining approval for moving costs between budget accounts, ensuring employees follow overtime policies, and defining parameters for granting paid administrative leave. In summary, improving oversight of fiscal management and accounting practices will increase transparency, reduce work programs and personnel costs, and could benefit Nevada by up to $29.2 million annually. We would like to thank Ndoc management and staff for their time and input throughout the audit. We would be happy to answer any questions the committee may have at this time.
Thank you. Does the committee have any questions on this one?
Yes, Governor, this is Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall.
Go ahead, Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, so as soon as you bring up the store fund at incarceration sites and over expenditures and lack of transparency, I become concerned because those who are incarcerated are, that is the only place they can get things like shoes. There have been a number of expose news articles around the country about people who are incarcerated having to get money from their family, being unable to get basic things like shoes. And so the fact that this is coming up here in our Department of Corrections gives me a lot of concern. And what I'd like to know is whether you believe that following through on this audit will ensure that simply the fact that someone's incarcerated doesn't mean that they and their family are forced, like indentured servants, to buy at the farm shop, so to speak, at high rates, which then keeps them in a state of debt.
I would defer this question to our Administrator, Warren Lohman.
Or else if you need Director Daniels to weigh in, go ahead.
Governor, for the record, Warren Lohman. Lieutenant Governor, we are going to be taking a deeper look into transactions for those sorts of items at the offender store in our follow-up audit, our second audit. I think we can get to most of the question that you asked, but in terms of any kind of, is there a competition to the store, that sort of thing, I would ask Director Daniels and his leadership team to comment on that.
Well,
good morning.
I'm sorry, this is Kate Marshall. I'm not asking necessarily for competition unless that were a recommendation. I am asking, however, that the fact that the store has a monopoly on anyone who needs anything not lead to monopoly pricing at the expense of the families of people who are incarcerated, and at the expense of people who are incarcerated not being able to have simple things like shoes. I have seen some of the incarcerated persons walking around in shoes because they have various work programs here around the state building, Capitol building, walking around in shoes that are not shoes, basically. They're tape. So I think that if you are going to be able to follow through on that, I think I would greatly appreciate that.
For the record, Warren Lohman, yes, Lieutenant Governor, we will include in our second audit in our audit plan and the methodology a look at pricing and how that compares to the outside market. I'm sure the director would like to comment on this as well.
Good morning, Governor Sisolak and members of the committee. This is Christina Shea with the Nevada Department of Corrections. Just to provide some clarification on it, the offender store fund and sort of the information that you're seeing maybe in some of the news, they're sort of separate issues. Basically, the offender store fund and the monies that are subject to 233B are related to sort of the cost of goods sold. So anything associated with those costs would actually be part of what the cost that the inmate would would actually pay for something. The department is definitely committed to working with the AG's office and making sure that we're in compliance with 233B and moving forward. But I just wanted to make sure that there are separate mechanisms where offenders can actually purchase things versus the cost of goods sold that would be associated with the offender store fund.
Thank you. And I want to say that I realize that there's a lot of strain and a lot of vacancies, and that the kind of job that you're doing is very, very difficult. And a lot of your employees are working under difficult conditions. So I appreciate that. But that doesn't, as you and I know, we still have to be diligent and make sure that we are not abusing people or their families simply because they're incarcerated.
Director Daniels, if you don't mind speaking up on this one, we had this discussion at the Board of Examiners, and Lieutenant or Secretary of State Sagaski and Attorney General Ford are on that board with me when it related to funding, sending money in and the accounting of that money. And there was an explanation given about how much can be sent in by the families every quarter for food and for other sundry type items. Can someone from DOC explain that to the other members?
Hi, this is Director Daniels. Thank you, Governor. I will have Deputy Director Christina Shea address that issue. Deputy Director.
Thank you, Director. And thank you for the question, Governor Sisolak. So, yes, the Board of Prison meeting, we discussed the AR 258, and there's a couple of different mechanisms. So there's the mechanism where families can send money into directly to an offender into their trust account. And therefore, that's a lot of the conversations that were happening at that meeting. But there's also other mechanisms where basically once the offender receives money into the trust account, they can use some of that money to purchase things from the commissary and other avenues. There's also additionally a package program where the family members can directly purchase things for the inmates. It's a quarterly system. The limits right now are set at $125 a quarter, and depending on if it's a clothing item or if it's a food purchase program. So there's several different ways that inmates and on top of the food services and the basic services that are actually provided by the department. So there's the department provided services, there's the ability for the inmate to receive funding and buy directly from the commissary, and there is also the ability for the inmates and the inmates' families to send send packages through the package program quarterly.
Does that help, Lieutenant Governor?
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions on this one?
Governor, this is Director Daniels. I just wanted to also share that statutorily, we are required to replace hygiene items, underclothing, and shoes at a minimum of every 6 months, as well as when needed. And so I'm not sure what's being referenced, but we are statutorily required to provide the basic needs for the inmates, and we do. That's my comment.
I appreciate that, and perhaps the gentleman that I saw wore his shoes out quicker, but they were indeed in very, very, very dilapidated state.
Thank you. This is Director Daniels, and I will assure you we will remain vigilant for individuals who have shoes or other items that are no longer serviceable, and we will ensure that they get them. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Any other questions on this audit for fiscal processes, DOC?
Governor, this is Zach Conan.
Yes, Treasurer, go ahead.
Thank you. I was looking at the grant award where only $63,000 of an $860,000 grant was spent within the initial expected time period. And I know we're doing a lot of work at the state level to try and increase the amount of federal funds we can get. And one of the big pieces there, of course, is making sure that we project accurately with what we could use. I was curious, how did that happen? How do we request $860,000 and only spend 63 of them?
Heather Domenici, for the record, I would defer this question to Director Daniels.
Hi, this is Director Daniels. I will defer this to Deputy Director Shea.
Thank you, Director Daniels, and thank you, Mr. Conine. So I'm looking actually at the specific grant, and honestly, as a department, I think in general, we are facing sort of looking at our grants as a whole, and I think that in general, there's a lot of areas for improvement department-wide for us to really make sure that we're accurately projecting the grants, and then also making sure we're executing them appropriately. Across the agency, we're seeing that we have grant funding that we need to spend, and we face issues with hiring staff, being able to implement the grant in a timely manner, dealing with the components of the mechanisms of redistribution of the funds, whether it's if we can't hire staff, being able to hire contract services. So in general, there's a lot of issues that we face specifically related to grants, and as a department and as an executive team, we're committed to looking at that and really taking a deeper dive into how we can be more successful in when we request funding that we execute and make sure we provide the programming in accordance with the grants.
This is Treasurer Conan. I appreciate that, and certainly we can chat offline. There might be a way that we can help. Thanks.
Hi, this is Trudy DeLong, and I would just offer, I work for a nonprofit, and we have millions of dollars in federal grants, and it is not, I would say, imprudent that they don't all get spent. There are a lot of things that the federal government makes you go through to even access the grants, as far as getting budgets approved, and if you don't have all the personnel hired at the time, they don't let you draw down the money. So there are some issues, and I appreciate the department is working as hard as they can, but just from personal knowledge, it is not always easy to spend all the money that they attribute to you.
Do I have any further questions on this audit? Everybody get their questions answered? Okay, moving on to the item D, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Division of Environmental Protection, Certified Environmental Manager Oversight.
For the record, Jeff Landerfelt. Here to represent the Division of Environmental Protection is Greg Lovato, Administrator. Our audit focused on ensuring more transparency and petroleum fund cleanup costs with the objective of improving oversight of certified internal environmental managers, commonly known as CEMs. Improving oversight of CEMs would assure petroleum fund managers that project costs are controlled as established by the cost guidelines. To that end, we make 4 recommendations. First, we recommend the petroleum fund reconcile project costs to authorized costs. Examination of sampled projects shows improvements are needed for reconciliation of claims associated with assessment and remediation tasks. First, requiring invoice skill levels to reflect proposed skill levels would help ensure accuracy and prevent inflation of project costs. Secondly, each CEM invoice must be itemized to clearly identify costs associated with a specific proposed task. Ensuring reimbursement claims itemize costs associated with specific tasks and denying claims not meeting such criteria would help ensure transparency in invoices. Secondly, we recommend the Petroleum Fund establish a rate schedule for professional services to ensure consistent rates for CEMs. Current guidelines give CEMs the latitude to charge whatever rate they deem appropriate for any professional skill described in the cost guidelines. Our examination of sampled underground storage tank projects revealed a 45% variance for staff geologist rates among 4 different CEMs. As such, overpayment through rate inflation may amount to as much as $1 million annually. Other states have established rate schedules to minimize rate variability for projects and professional services, which suggests that INDEP could do the same to reduce costs. Third, we recommend the Petroleum Fund strengthen CEM certification requirements. In our survey of remediation professionals in Nevada, we were advised that some CEMs may lack the necessary skills to properly assess and design remediation plans. Furthermore, research indicated that CEM certification in Nevada is not as robust as other states. To improve oversight of CEMs and remediation projects, Ndoc should consider adjusting compensation to fill a key site management position. Additionally, strengthening CEM certification requirements will ensure individuals hired to manage remediation projects have a strong working knowledge of geological and engineering principles. Lastly, we recommend the Petroleum Fund perform random verification of proofs of payment to ensure owner-operators of storage tanks are fulfilling their 10% financial obligations for remediation activities. Ndoc has established proof of payment guidelines that identify various scenarios, various claims reimbursement scenarios. However, not all scenarios require source documents, such as process checks or bank statements, to verify whether owner-operators are meeting their financial obligations. In an effort to gain business, CEMs could stipulate in an informal agreement with the owner-operator that they would accept 90% reimbursement from the fund as payment in full. This would effectively relieve the owner-operator of its 10% financial obligation. Ndoc should randomly verify that appropriate co-payments have been made by the owner-operator in scenarios where non-source documents, such as affidavits or letterhead declarations, have been accepted. We would like to thank the Division of Environmental Protection and its staff for their time and input throughout this audit. We'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have at this time.
Thank you, appreciate it. Do I have any questions from anyone on the Department of Conservation Natural Resources, Division of Environmental Protection, Certified Environmental Manager, Oversight Audit? Anybody? Okay, moving on to the next one. Department of Administration and Governor's Finance Office, Board of Pharmacy, Deferred Compensation.
For the record, Jeff Landerfelt. On the phone representing the Nevada Deferred Compensation Program is Executive Director Rob Beamer. Also on the phone representing the Board of Pharmacy are Executive Director Dave Wiest and General Counsel Brett Kant. This audit's objective was to clarify Deferred Compensation Program statutory guidelines to help guide agency decisions. To this end, we make two recommendations. First, we recommend proposing legislation clarifying state agency employer matching contributions to employee deferred compensation accounts. This will ensure all state employees are treated equitably and the intent for state employee compensation limits are adhered to by agency management. The Nevada Deferred Compensation Program is a voluntary 457B retirement savings program for employees of the state and local governments, which allows state agency employer matching contributions despite unclear statutory guidance. There is no statutory language providing for employer matches. The language speaks only to managing a program for employee contributions. The Board of Pharmacy employer matching contributions are unique and generous when compared to public and private sector matches. The board's 50% match may not be excessive by private sector standards. However, the board offers both PERS, a defined benefit pension plan, in addition to the deferred compensation plan with employer contribution, which is exceedingly rare in either a public or private sector plan. Further, the board's contributions may violate the intent of the 95% rule for state employee compensation relative to the governor's salary. 3 other state independent licensing boards contribute to employees' 457B accounts, but do so as a percentage of salary regardless of employees' contribution. None of these boards participate in PERS. The Board of Pharmacy is the only board or state agency that provides contributions to employees' deferred compensation accounts and also participates in PERS. The Department of Administration Deferred Compensation Program plans to fully implement the recommendation by July 2023. Secondly, we recommend referring facts to the Office of the Attorney General to determine if open meeting law violations were made by the Board of Pharmacy on deferred compensation match decisions. The Board of Pharmacy's approval on matching contribution increases may not have been transparent. Board meeting agendas and minutes do not provide details of deferred compensation employee match decisions. The board appears to hide staff compensation increases while approving increases in license fees for the professionals regulated by the board. This recommendation will be implemented by the Governor's Finance Office by March 2021. We'd like to thank the leadership at the Department of Administration, Nevada Deferred Compensation Program, and the Board of Pharmacy for their time and input throughout this review. We'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have at this time.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions on the Department of Board of Pharmacy Deferred Compensation Match Audit?
Governor, this is Zach Conine.
Go ahead, Treasurer.
This one was frustrating to me. And so I'm curious, could someone take me through the timeline of when there was a decrease in compensation due to the violations of the 95% rule, and then when the additional deferred compensation matches were installed?
Yes, sir. The adjustment for the 95% rule followed, I can't be for sure. I would have to look that up. The audit we did on the 95% rule was the second board's audit that we did. I'm thinking it coincides, that would have been around the middle of 2019, I believe, and the increase to the match rate for employer compensation, the first increase was in June of 2019. That was from 10 to 30%, and that 10% had been in place for about 20 years. Then there was an increase from 10 to 30% in June of 19, as I mentioned. There was another increase from 30 to 50% in January of 2020. So
thank you. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I'm not sure of the exact time frame, but it would have been within probably 6 months of the second audit dealing with board salaries, the 95% rule.
So I guess my question for the board is, that all seems pretty coincidental, right? So can anybody explain why that was taken on then as opposed to taken on beforehand, if not for the most obvious reason of trying to get around the 95% rule again?
This is Dave Weiss for the record, and I appreciate the question. Thank you, Treasurer, and thanks for the committee and Governor Sisolak. I think Jeff encapsulated it pretty well, but the timing is this. The match has been on for 19 years, so it's 19 years that we've been doing the match, and so if we're talking about the 95% rule and that being a component of what we were doing, that was in effect for 19 years. The timing for this budget started in the spring of 2019. It was, as Jeff said, was approved in June of 2019, and then the change in salary that came a part of the audit was actually October or September, October of 2019. So I understand your question about the timing, but they weren't related to each other. And I'll reiterate back to the audit itself where it says that we're not in violation of the 95% rule, that is not part of our wage.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have a question on Board of Pharmacy Deferred Compensation Match Audit? Okay, seeing none, moving on to presentation of audit 6-month follow-up status reports pursuant to NRS 353A.090, Board of Pharmacy licensing process.
For the record, Jeff Landerfelt. Representing the Board of Pharmacy are David Weiss, Executive Director, and Brett Kant, General Counsel. Of the 5 recommendations contained on DI report number 20-05, the board has fully implemented 2 and partially implemented 3. Regarding the first fully implemented recommendation to establish management oversight of the background check cycle, the board created a full cycle tracking log with periodic reviews for potentially delayed background checks. The board also modified the background check procedures manual to clarify that the executive director will request a civil name check in all cases when fingerprints have been rejected twice by the central repository. To address the second fully implemented recommendation to account for fingerprint fees separately, the board established a separate bank account for fingerprint fees, which is reconciled monthly with internal records of background check transactions. Regarding the three partially implemented recommendations, first, to enforce fingerprint authority more stringently, the board modified regulation to define, quote, persons of influence, conduct background checks on those with, quote, significant influence, and require licensees to include on the annual update all officers listed with the wholesaler's official business registration. The new regulations also address the second partially implemented recommendation to modify fingerprint protocols for license renewals, which now only require criminal background checks for initial wholesaler licensure, but not for license renewal unless the updated annual list includes new stakeholders with, quote, significant influence. The new regulations were adopted in August. The board reports these recommendations have since been fully implemented. DIA will verify that the provisions of the new regulations are practiced in the first annual follow-up. The final partially implemented recommendation to require fingerprint background checks for other license types requires legislative action. To that end, the board has developed a bill draft request for consideration during the 2021 legislative session. Full implementation is expected July 2021. We would like to thank the Board of Pharmacy staff for their cooperation and assistance during this review. Board representatives are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from any board members on the Board of Pharmacy licensing process? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to next on Department of Public Safety, Parole and Probation, Offender Services.
For the record, Jeff Landerfelt, representing the Division of Parole and Probation, is Chief Tom Lawson. Of the four recommendations contained in DIA report number 20-06, NPP has fully implemented 2 and partially implemented 2. Regarding the first fully implemented recommendation to develop additional performance measures for programs and services, NPP in its most recent strategic plan modified its strategies to improve the discharge success rate. NPP also added a performance measure related to the case closure cycle time with underlying strategies to improve key operational support processes. Regarding the second fully implemented recommendation to allocate resources to other successful programs and services, in April, IFC reviewed and approved NPP's request to transfer available funds to the Going Home Prepared category indigent funding. Also, NPP documented in its most recent strategic plan an ongoing commitment to optimize indigent funding availability and obtain counseling program funding through grants legislation. Regarding the first of the 2 partially implemented recommendations to revise the division's definition of recidivism, NPP examined the current definition and considered each element proposed for inclusion by the audit. NPP reports that tracking the discharge success rate and calculating the recidivism rate in the future will capture an accurate picture of ongoing criminalistic behavior. NPP has included a requirement for the calculation of a recidivism rate in the solicitation for a new offender records management system. To adopt internal controls for offender data, the final partially implemented recommendation, NPP provided updates to 3 of its operating manuals as guides for enhanced internal controls over data. NPP reports that all other internal control development will be implemented with the new records management system expected to be deployed during fiscal year 2022. DIA will verify full implementation in subsequent annual follow-ups. We would like to thank the NPP staff for their cooperation and assistance during this review. Agency representatives are available to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on Department of Public Safety, Parole and Probation, Offender Services Audit?
Governor, this is Kate Marshall, Lieutenant Governor.
Go ahead, Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think it's important that these partially implemented recommendations, which involve the collection of data that allows us to better determine, anytime we can collect data to review kind of measure what we are doing, I think it's important. Other states, Georgia, I think, is one that have been very successful in being able to improve outcomes by collecting data, and certainly outcomes on recidivism. If we can then find ways to facilitate people not having to return, that is good for everyone. So I really appreciate what the audit division is doing here, and I would encourage MPP to begin to collect data so that we can measure what we're doing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to Department of Administration Purchasing Division, Foreign Vendor Management.
Heather Domenici for the record. Representing the Department of Administration Purchasing Division is Administrator Kevin Doty. As part of the 3 recommendations that we made in our audit of DIA report number 2007 on foreign vendor management, 2 of the 3 recommendations have been partially implemented, while 1 has no action. Recommendation 1, for improving the outreach efforts to Nevada vendors and establishing a mechanism to track and measure the program's effectiveness, has not had any action. The division was looking at perhaps changing a position to encompass a larger sphere of responsibilities, and that has not happened to date. Recommendation 2, to seek a BDR to reinstate the inverse preference law, as well as recommendation 3, establish a statewide suspended debarred vendor list, will be presented to the 2021 legislature in the form of a BDR, and they anticipate an implementation by July 2021. Thank you for assisting us in the presentation of this audit update.
Thank you. I've got a question on recommendation 1. There's a position that's not filled to meet the needs identified as part of the audit recommendation. It's about 4 paragraphs on the bottom. Should have included assisting Nevada vendors draft effective requests for proposals. It has been my position and continues to be my position, and I think I speak for the board, I don't know if anybody feels otherwise, that when we're getting these vendors, we would prefer Nevada-based companies. So why was that not done?
Kevin Doty for the record. Thank you for the question, Governor. Our intention was to hopefully add a trainer position to our vendor outreach position that already existed. And because we couldn't get funding for that, we had already filled the vendor outreach position prior to last February's EBAC meeting. Fortunately, the person we hired for that position, Ray Sanchez, is well suited to train Nevada vendors. He's bilingual, and he served in the Peace Corps, where he had experience teaching computer skills to people in the Dominican Republic. So he's ideally suited to do more of the training that we want to be addressed towards Nevada vendors. We've done some of that. We've been limited by the pandemic. We've had to do virtual vendor fairs as opposed to the typical in-person vendor fairs that we've done in the past. But we continue to try to add as many Nevada vendors to our list of potential vendors as possible.
Well, and I appreciate the intentions, and they're good intentions, but you know what they say about intentions. And I know that everything gets blamed on the pandemic in terms of we couldn't do it this way, we couldn't do it that way. I'm going to reiterate one more time. It is my express desire that whenever possible, we use Nevada vendors. So whatever you have to do to get this done, I'm going to assume that it's going to be done by the next time we talk, okay?
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions on this audit? No? Okay. Moving on to D, Administrative Services, Bond Management and Accounting.
Heather Domenici for the record. This is the 6-month follow-up to our Department of Administration Administrative Services Division Audit, DIA Report Number 2008, which focused on improving bond management and accounting. Representing ASD is Matthew Tuma, Administrator. All three recommendations were partially implemented. ASD reports broadening evaluation of public works project spending assumptions, calculations, and forecast methodology, and has begun implementing retrospective forecast reviews. ASD additionally reviewed accounting procedures with staff, increased bond draw oversight, and increased its participation in CIP planning processes, bond reallocations, and general fund authorizations. ASD anticipates fully implementing the recommendations by July 1st, 2021, following implementation of the remainder of bond spending forecasts, recommended actions, and completion of updates to written policies and procedures. We thank ASD for its assistance in preparing our report.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the Department of Administration, Administrative Services Division bond issue, bond audit?
Governor, this is Zach Conan.
I knew this was right down your alley. Go ahead, Zach.
I am constitutionally required to talk about bonds. Thank you. I just wanted to say that we've seen the other side of this, and I really wanted to thank ASD and everyone else involved for their commitment to making sure that we borrow just as much money as we need and not a penny more, while making sure that we can use those bond funds to get Nevadans back to work. So I'm just really grateful for the work they're doing, and I'm glad that it's working out.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much. Any other questions on this one? Okay, moving on to the Governor's Finance Office, Department of Public Safety, Division of Parole and Probation, Probation Cost Sharing.
Heather Domenici for the record. This is the 6-month follow-up of the Governor's Finance Office audit, July 2020 report number DIA 2009, regarding the Division of Parole and Probation cost sharing. The review determined that GFO took no action on the one recommendation to develop a cost-sharing formula with counties for supervision costs and probations. We are awaiting a decision by the Office of the Governor regarding the recommendation. We would like to thank the GFO for their assistance in preparing our report.
Okay, do we have any questions on this audit for probation cost sharing? Department of Public Safety, Division of Parole and Probation. Hearing and seeing none, let's move on to Department of Administration, State Public Works Division, Long-Term Office Space Planning Mechanism. Okay, can you hear me? That would be F. Hello?
Oh, sorry, sir. Yes, sir. I didn't have my mic on. I apologize. For the record, Jeff Landerfelt, on the phone representing the State Public Works Division, is Ward Patrick, Administrator. DIA made 5 recommendations in this audit to address the state's lack of adequate long-term office space planning. Public Works noted in its response to the original audit that it would pursue the legislative authority and funding necessary to implement the 5 recommendations in the 2023 legislative session. Consistent with that plan, Public Works has taken no action on the 5 recommendations at this point. We would like to thank the State Public Works Division and its staff for their time and input throughout this review. We'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have at this time.
Okay, I appreciate that. My questions are 2023. I mean, really, we got a session starting Monday. What has been the delay that we couldn't do this quicker than this?
Governor, is that, would you like me to address that as the auditor or the agency?
The agency.
Thank you.
Please.
This is Ward Patrick for the record, Administrator for the State Public Works Division. So this audit came out in July of this last year, which is past the time for BDR requests as well as budget requests. And so this audit is just a little bit in poor timing in that regards. We anticipate getting started working on this immediately after the legislative session. We'll be developing bill drafts, decision models, as well as incorporating modifications to the capital improvement program planning process. And so it's our intention to fully implement the recommendations and we plan to begin that after the legislative session.
Okay, so when did you get the audit? July of 2020?
Ward Patrick, for the record, correct.
For the record, Jeff Landerfeld, yes, sir, it was July the 6th, I believe, 2020.
Okay, well, I guess there's nothing I can do if it was because of the timeline and you getting the audit, but I'd like you to get going on that and not necessarily wait till the end of the legislative session, because this is extremely important. I know that my colleagues and I sit on that Board of Examiners. We're approving an awful lot of lease items, and if there's an issue, we can save the state a lot of money, so I don't want to put this off just because of a time issue, that 2023 session. So can we get started on that ASAP, please?
Yes, sir. Ward Patrick, for the record, we'll get started on that ASAP.
Thank you. Any other questions on this one? Okay, moving on to letter G, Department of Administration Purchasing, Master Service Agreements for Direct Client Services and BOE approval process.
Heather Domenici for the record. Representing the Purchasing Division is Administrator Kevin Doty. Of the 3 recommendations we made, all 3 were partially implemented. Recommendations 1, to delegate authority for procuring direct client services, and recommendation 3, to seek BADR to allow the clerk of the BOE to approve contracts for services valued up to $100,000, will be included in a BDR that is submitted to the 2021 legislature to delegate authority. Additionally, the contract will be approved as to form by the Attorney General. The Division anticipates that these will be implemented by July 1 of 2021. Recommendation 2 was also partially implemented, and the Division reported that it established a compliance review program for agencies with delegated procurement authority for direct client services. They are reviewing Arizona's compliance plan and emphasis on risk, and they're developing an in-house compliance review program based on that model. This will be fully implemented by July 2021. We would like to thank the division for their assistance in preparing our report.
Okay, do we have any questions on this one? Nothing? Okay, I'm going to go back to the last one again on the delay because of legislative session. How long will it take to get that done if we get a sponsor to carry that bill?
Myself. My name is Hank Levy. I am the elected treasurer tax collector of Alameda County, California. The weather here today in Oakland is chilly and rainy.
Hello?
I'm the deferred compensation plan officer for our 457.
Hello, there's someone else on the
Whoa,
line.
whoa, whoa. Yeah, who's controlling the meeting here? Who's letting that call get through? Okay, back to my question. On the long-term office space one, can we get it done this session that we can have somebody carry that bill? Maybe this is the reason.
I believe the question is for the agency. Is that State Public Works Board?
I think Ward may have hung up after his last.
I'm still here. I wasn't aware there was a question on my item. Could I hear that again, please? Sorry.
Okay. Can we get this done quick enough that I could get somebody to carry that bill and sponsor it?
Thank you, Ward Patrick. For the record, I would need to, we have an in-house attorney, and so we can consult with her and get back to you within a day or two.
Okay. Please get back to me by tomorrow afternoon if you would.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're moving on. Did we have any questions on G? Okay, moving on to H, statewide cell phone mobile device use.
Heather Domenici for the record. This is the 6-month follow-up for the July 2020 report, DIA 2012 statewide cell phone mobile and device use. Of the 3 recommendations, 1 was fully implemented, 1 was partially implemented, and 1 has no action. As to the fully implemented recommendation, Recommendation 3, to revise SAM to reflect federal guidelines and cell phone stipends, the SAM was fully updated on October 13th, 2020 BOE meeting. For Recommendation 1, to develop statewide cell phone mobile device use policy, GFO directed the Division of Internal Audits to develop a statewide cell phone mobile device use policy and to update existing guidelines in the State Administrative Manual. DIA will collaborate with state agencies prior to finalizing the draft policy and following research. This recommendation is expected to be implemented by October of 2021. Recommendation 2, to determine the best cell phone mobile device use option and assess if usage data supports cell phone mobile device expenditure, has no action as it is dependent upon the approval and the implementation of Recommendation 1. If Recommendation 1 is implemented, they expect the Recommendation 2 to be implemented by July of 2022. We would like to thank the GFO for their assistance in preparing our report.
Governor,
I'm sorry, I was muted. Move on to item number 6, Secretary of State Elections Division.
Heather Domenici for the record. This is the first annual follow-up to our Secretary of State Elections Division Audit DIA Report Number 1901, which focused on improving oversight of Secretary of State Elections Administration. Representing the Secretary of State is Scott Anderson, Chief Deputy Secretary of State. There were 5 outstanding recommendations. Since our 6-month follow-up, the Elections Division has fully implemented Recommendation 2 to evaluate using Oregon's recall petition signature verification methodology. Around the same time as the evaluation, SB 450 of the 2019 legislative session increased recall petition signature verification requirements and was signed into law by the governor on June 1st, 2019, which was immediately effective. The Elections Division reports it has partially implemented Recommendations 1 and 3 through 5. The division anticipates fully implementing Recommendations 1 and 3 in early 2022, following full adoption of new and revised election regulations. The division anticipates implementing Recommendations 4 and 5 within the next 6 to 8 months. We thank the Secretary of State and the Elections Division for their assistance in preparing our report.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on Secretary of State Elections Division? Annual follow-up. Go ahead, Secretary.
Thank you so much. This is Barbara Sagaski for the record. I just want to thank the auditors. They have been very patient, and I love what we're doing. I have to tell you, everything that they're saying, everything that they recommend is all very good, and they've done an excellent job. So thank you, Governor, and I'm very grateful for the former Governor, Brian Sandoval, for suggesting that we have an audit on our division. So thank you for this. And I do have also Scott Anderson on the phone, but I also have Mark Velashan, who is my deputy for elections, if you have any questions. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Do we have any questions for the Secretary of State? Anybody? No. Thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us on the call. Next one, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry.
Heather Domenici for the record. This is the first annual follow-up of our audit on the Division of Forestry, DIA Report Number 1902. State Fire Warden Casey is present, representing the division. Of the 4 recommendations that we made, 1 was fully implemented, 2 were partially implemented, and 1 has no action. Recommendation 2 to collaborate with Ndoc to expedite the billing process has been fully implemented. The division reported that Ndoc and NDF are collaborating to expedite the billing process through communication and process improvements. However, they are still experiencing delays in reimbursements from them. Recommendation 1 is partially implemented to automate the wildland fire billing process, and it is expected to be fully implemented by September 2020, as of the date of the report. Recommendation 3 to develop a strategic plan for the Wildlife Fire Protection Program is partially implemented, and the division will need to adopt its strategic plan for the WFPP. We will have to confirm at a later date whether or not this has been implemented into the strategic plan. Recommendation 4 to seek authority to require participation in the Wildland Fire Protection Program. The division has reported, there is no action on this, and the division has reported it will not seek authority to require participation, and that it will continue to encourage voluntary participation in the program. We would like to thank the division for their assistance in preparation of this report.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions on Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Division of Forestry Audit?
Governor, this is Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall.
Go ahead, Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, with respect to recommendation 4, my understanding is that participation in the Wildland Fire Protection Program would allow for cost sharing between the state and cities and counties where costs are incurred across those jurisdictions. And I think that it appears that if we don't participate in that, then what's happening is the state is saying that it will bear the entire cost. And I think that's a policy decision, obviously, for your office to make whether or not that's the way you want to do it. But I would like to point out that I think that's what's involved here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the reason they're not, do we have a reason that they're not participating? Is it because of cost, of time, or what is it? Do I have the agency on the phone?
Hi, this is Casey. Casey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Casey for the record. There's different reasons for why some entities are not participating. We have most agencies across the state in participation right now. Clark County is one we've been working with over time. A lot of the reasons why they aren't participating is fire risk. Some of these departments just don't have a large fire risk. Everyone else is in that has pretty high fire risk, as they can't budget appropriately for the fire that we're seeing these days, the increase in fires across the West. But so Mineral County, I think, is one example. Clark County we are working with, and I believe that they will, most entities in Clark County have joined. We're waiting on Clark County probably this year joining.
So it's just Clark and Mineral that are the problem?
Yeah, those are the only non-participants other than General Lyon. And General Lyon's issue is there isn't a fire protection district that's actually in charge of that. And a lot of that is a state park in which we are actually now responsible for, the state, under the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources as a state park. So those are the holes right now.
This is Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall. Can I just ask if we were part of the Wildland Fire Protection Program and required participation in that program, how much money would the state save?
Thanks again for the record, Casey with the Nevada Division of Forestry. It's not a matter of saving. In fact, participation costs the state more money. What the participation is once a county decides to participate, they pay in a portion of funds. We have a formula that we have created and given to you guys through this audit that is developed based on fire risk, but then also the areas within the county where we might be able to reduce those risks. And once you are a participant, it allows you access into our emergency response account, the budget account 4196 for us, which allows the state to assist the counties in paying their fire bills over 24 hours. So mutual aid is the first 24 hours on a fire. We don't cover those costs.
But let me just ask you, I mean, I don't understand why we wouldn't want to require participation in something that allows us to reduce risks on fires and work together and collaborate across jurisdictions with respect to fire protection, given that we live in an area of the world where that is a huge concern.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Again, for the record, Casey. I agree, but forced participation, we did pull together a panel of local fire chiefs as well as state and federal wildland fire managers. And the consensus of the fire chiefs was they wanted to have the ability to opt in or opt out, particularly with the cost of opting in for them. However, we continue to show them every year, annually, how much we pay on their behalf from a fire perspective. And so all of them actually are getting a pretty good deal to be in the system. In addition, we have really beefed up in the last 2 years the risk reduction piece, where we're working very closely with each of these departments to do fuel reduction projects in high priority areas and try to reduce that risk as we then own that and get them fire trucks or whatever we possibly can do to reduce that risk. It was the consensus of the fire departments to not want to. In particular, like I will give an example of Elko. When we created the formula based on the data that we had, it greatly increased Elko's cost. I think they're just over $1 million. Though our average payout for Elko County is about $2.5 to $5 million annually because their fire risk is high. They did want to continue to keep the option, though they haven't opted out. They wanted to keep the option to be able to opt out. If they opt out, they opt to pay for their fire bills.
Well, I'm not understanding that.
I think this is your deal, yeah.
What the Lieutenant Governor is saying, they get to opt in or opt out, but if they don't opt in, we still cover it? That doesn't make any sense.
Thanks again for the record, Casey. If they opt out, we do not cover any of their fire costs. We bill them for any response. All agencies bill the county, and the county is responsible for their fire costs.
But you said they want to maintain the option of opting in or out. If they're not opting in, are they opting out, or is there a middle Switzerland position?
Yeah, most of them are opting in, as I said, and most have continued to see value and are choosing to opt in, other than the couple counties who don't have a large wildland fire risk.
So is Elko in or Elko out?
Elko's in currently. Elko's been in since the inception of the program. They are currently paying at a lesser rate. If you recall, in the last budget session, we opted to try to give them an increased rate annually to try to get them to not have to have such a high increase at one time.
So how much are they paying? Do we have them on a payment plan, or what's going on?
Yeah, they are paying, I believe, these are off the top of my head numbers, but 1.2 is their buy-in rate, and they're paying right now $800,000.
Okay, well, let's get them up to the 1.2 million, because everybody's got to pay their fair share, okay?
Thank you. That's our goal, yes.
I mean, Governor.
I know that's our goal, but I need to get it done. Go ahead, Lieutenant Governor.
Governor, yeah. So my view is that costs and risk and best practices need to be coordinated and shared across all jurisdictions. We should be working together. And I think that if we should, God forbid, have some of the kinds of fires that we've seen in Australia and in California, we're all going to be on the hook for the cost, one way or the other. So we need to coordinate this and make sure that we are doing this in the most cost-effective and the most program-effective manner that allows us to potentially mitigate fire risk. Whether or not a particular area of the state believes that they have a high fire risk or not. So I think that this perhaps deserves some further review.
Okay, thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and I appreciate what you're saying. I understand it, but if you're going to be in and opt in, and we're obligated to pay the entire expenses related to a fire, you got to pay your fair share of opting in. If you're telling me they're $300,000 or $400,000 light, they got to Hey, or otherwise the other jurisdictions are all subsidizing them again. Okay, so if you take care of that, Casey, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, I will do that. We're negotiating the contracts right now, and I appreciate the guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item C, occupational and professional licensing boards.
For the record, Jeff Landerfelt, representing the Department of Business and Industry, is B&I Director Terry Reynolds. Because legislative action is required, both recommendations contained in DI Report Number 1903, Board's Governance, remain partially implemented. Our first recommendation was to establish executive branch oversight of boards under the Department of Business and Industry. Currently, B&I has no statutory authority to oversee the activities of the boards. B&I reports it will address any related legislation that emerges during the 2021 session. As with the first recommendation, B&I expects to implement our second recommendation to establish standards for regulatory, financial, and administrative operations through the Department of Business and Industry after it receives necessary authority. We'd like to thank B&I staff for their cooperation and assistance during this review.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on the Occupational Professional Licensing Board's governance audit? Okay, moving on to D, Nevada State Board of Dental Examiners, Board Operations.
Heather Domenici for the record. This is the first annual follow-up to our Nevada State Board of Dental Examiners Audit, DIA Report Number 1904, which focused on enhancing dental board operations. Representing the board are Dr. David Lee, Board Secretary Treasurer, Frank DiMaggio, Executive Director, and Phil Sue, General Counsel. Governor, this is what we would like to call a good news story. There were 4 outstanding recommendations. Since our 6-month follow-up, the board fully implemented recommendations 1 through 3 by ensuring licensee compliance monitoring is conducted by investigators instead of at the discretion of the Executive Director, consulting with the Commission on Ethics, requiring ethics law trainings for new board members, and hiring employee investigators instead of contractors. The board reports it has partially implemented recommendation 4 and anticipates fully implementing the recommendation by April 2022, following full adoption of revised regulations. We thank the board for its assistance in preparing our report.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the dental board, dental examiners? I've got an agency question. Do you continue to maintain an outside lobbyist?
Hello, this is Phil Sue for the record. Board General Counsel. We do. We recently retained Alfredo Alonso of Luz and Roca and his team to assist us.
Okay. So you've changed outside lobbyists?
We did, and we went through a group of them for consideration and brought that to the board for final approval.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions on the State Board of Dental Examiners? Moving on, last one here, group. Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Division of Environmental Protection, Petroleum Fund.
For the record, Jeff Landerfelt, representing the Division of Environmental Protection, is Division Administrator Greg Lovato. Of the 5 recommendations contained in DIE Report Number 20-06, NDEP has fully implemented 3 and partially implemented 2. Regarding the first of the 3 fully implemented recommendations, to adopt internal controls and processes to monitor costs and reduce risks of fraud and/or abuse of the fund by auditing cases and conducting site visits, NDEP developed user guides to ensure consistency when processing claims and strengthen the approval of claims payments. Additionally, a new board policy resolution was adopted to consolidate several existing resolutions with updated provisions that outline an inventory and inspection process for remedial equipment reimbursed by the fund. To address our recommendation to revise enrollment and reimbursement policies, NDEP revised an existing board policy resolution to clarify what cleanup costs are eligible for reimbursement. Additionally, NDEP created a bill draft request for the 2021 legislative session, proposing statutory language to clarify pre-registration tank testing requirements. For the final fully implemented recommendation to develop additional risk-based decision-making tools to assist in reducing cleanup times. In-depth expanded coordination between responsible units to establish consistency in utilizing risk-based decision-making tools to expedite the cleanup of cases. In-depth performed a comparative analysis of open cases based on EPA data that showed Nevada's mean cleanup time is about 7 years, which is consistent with other states benchmarked in the audit. In-depth has reduced the number of active cases by 17%. Of the 24 legacy cases identified during the 6-month follow-up for possible closure, only 6 remain in need of additional remediation or monitoring. For the first of the 2 partially implemented recommendations to follow statute for third-party liability, the audit reported that third-party liability funds may only be paid to satisfy third-party claims. In-depth staff, citing Board Resolution 2007-10, asserted that third-party liability funds may be used for corrective action to mitigate potential third-party liability claims. The audit notes that Resolution 2007-10 exceeds the regulatory authority expressed in NAC 445C-280. In-depth supplied legal analysis from the Attorney General's office supporting its interpretation. DIA's position remains that owner-operators may not access funds earmarked for public protection. If additional funds are needed for cleanup, increases to statutory liability limits should be sought. DIA drafted a request for an official opinion from the AGO as to whether the board resolution comports with the intent of NAC 445C-280. This request remains in process. Regarding the final partially implemented recommendation to adhere to legislative intent for petroleum fund awards, In-Depth developed a BDR for the 2021 legislative session that redefines small business. Proposed definitions include thresholds based on gross income, net income, fuel sales, and fuel throughput. We would like to thank the In-Depth staff for their cooperation and assistance during this review. Greg Lovato is available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from any board members on Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Division of Environmental Protection, Petroleum Fund Audit?
This is Barbara Sagaski, Secretary of State. I do.
Go ahead, Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. I just wanted to know if any of the site visits, that was my question last time at the last meeting, if any of those have been done or are being considered to be done. And then I just wondered when the AGO regarding the third-party liability and funding that opinion might be coming. And my last one is, did the audit staff talk with tank owners during the audit?
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Secretary, could you repeat the third question?
Yes. Did the audit staff talk with tank owners during the audit? I don't know why there's an echo, but.
Okay. Yes, so your first question, I'm going to defer that one to the agency. We noted in our audit that they had changed the resolution to set up a field inspection process for remediation equipment. That was the central issue in this audit. And the second question, I'll answer your third since I can remember that one right now. No, we did not contact tank owners ourselves directly. So, and I'm sorry, your second question.
I just wondered if you'd gotten the opinion from the Attorney General yet.
Yes, thank you. I'm not certain the exact status of that. I know it was drafted and requested. Where it sits in relation to being submitted to the Attorney General's office or its status within the Attorney General's office, I cannot speak to directly. I will find out and follow up with you if that's okay.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Governor, Aaron Ford here. May
yes, please.
Yeah, so, Madam Secretary, I don't know if we've received the request either, but if we have, I will, regardless, I'll check on the status within our office and see where it is if we have it.
Thank you, Attorney General.
And in response to your first question, I would ask Greg Lovato if he could respond.
Thank you, Secretary Zagaski. This is Greg Lovato, NDP Administrator. Good morning. So in regard to the field visits, as a part of that recommendation, we have been continuing to verify that the systems are in place, and we set up processes for doing that. We have a practice set up for doing that. We are requesting additional funding for from the Petroleum Fund as a part of this budget cycle to add a position in order to perform those field visits, and that is currently in our budget for the upcoming biennium.
Thank you.
Any further questions on that audit? Okay, moving on to outstanding audit recommendations, tracking, follow-up.
Heather Domenici for the record. This is the status of outstanding audit recommendations as of June 30, 2020. This is an information-only item. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Yeah, I don't want them to go through this. This is 16 pages of outstanding recommendations. Does anybody have any other ones? Any questions specifically on this? I got a question. When you're using language like the division represents there will be no further work on the recommendation, that's kind of like in your face, they're not going to work on the recommendation anymore. Is that how I should take that, or shouldn't I?
Heather Domenici for the record. When we are notified that a division is not going to take further action, that is what we're hearing, is that they will not be taking any further action on the recommendation.
Excuse me, Governor. This is Warren Lohman, if I can jump in here. That is, your interpretation is exactly correct. We do try to talk with the agencies and understand why they're making the decision they're making. And in some cases, we ask to continue to follow up with them so that we get to the intent of the recommendation. But in essence, what you've described is what.
I appreciate that, Warren, and I've got a problem with that. I mean, if this board, if your agency, if you've done these audits, and I commend you, you guys are doing a great job, you folks, absolutely incredible, and saving the state a lot of money, and this board takes the time to listen to them and accept them, and then they get agencies saying, well, geez, thanks for the recommendation, but stick it, we're not doing anything. I don't like that. So, Warren, if you want to get with me and we want to send a letter to each of these people and say that's not an acceptable response, or do something, because I don't know where the rest of the board feels. But, a lot of time goes into this, and then categorically dismiss them, I don't appreciate it.
Governor, this is Zach Kona, and I couldn't agree more.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Governor, Aaron Ford here. Listen, I agree. To the extent we are making recommendations to these agencies, if we want to make it beyond a recommendation and make it a directive, that would be something to consider as well. But I could understand why someone would think that they have the discretion to define a recommendation, so to speak.
Yeah, okay. Well, Warren, if you then would... Go ahead, Barbara.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to say that I'm not happy about it either, as you see it, just, basically see it, but we don't know all the circumstances. So if Warren could go over with you all of those, that would be preferable to make sure, but I do agree with sending them a letter asking for more detail as to why they can't or why they aren't going to take any more action.
Right. Well, some of them, and I appreciate that.
About just doing a blanket.
Yeah. Some of that I agree. For example, and I'm going to pull you out of here, the Secretary of State, your status notes are acceptable. I mean, you've got this plan, you've made an adjustment. Some of them just seem dismissive. Not yours, certainly, but some of the ones I see as being dismissive. And Warren, if you want to get with my office on that, I want to follow up if we could, okay?
Thank you.
Yes, Governor, I'll do.
Thank you. Okay, that is item number 7. Item 8, estimated benefits and dividends from audit recommendations.
Thank you, Governor. Heather Domenici for the record. This is the estimated benefits to Nevadans from implemented recommendations, and that is going, we track these for 9 years following the recommendation being implemented, and we'd like to point your attention to page 7, the last page of the report, where in FY20, for every dollar invested in the Division of Internal Audits, there was a return of $77.
I've got a circle around that one, Heather, and I appreciate that. That just goes to show you that it's working. And I'm not a believer, and I really admire, I've served on audit committees for the county and the university and this one. You don't play gotcha with your audits, which I really appreciate. You're not looking to catch somebody or embarrass them. These are great suggestions. That's why I'm so concerned when they're dismissed by agencies, because it is $77, for every dollar invested. $98 million in total, which is absolutely outstanding. So thank you for that. We appreciate that, and that's something we could put in a letter and point out to everybody. Do we have any other questions on that one? Okay. Item number 9, approval of division's annual report pursuant to NRS 353A.065.
Yeah, Governor, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for the record, Jeff Landerfeld, we would just simply ask for approval of the 2020 annual report. This is normally presented in November. There's various details of our accomplishments through the year, and if any members have questions, I'll defer to Heather because she was very involved in preparing this.
No, I do appreciate it. It was very well done. Do we have a motion on acceptance? Approval of the annual report?
Hi, this is Judy DeLong, and being a career auditor, I would love to motion, because it's a great report. Thank you, guys.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor and a second. Is there a second?
Yes, Barbara Sagowski.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Number 10, approval of the annual audit plan pursuant to NRS 353A.038.
Yes, sir. For the record, Jeff Landerfeld, behind tab 10, you will see our audit plan for fiscal year 2021. Noted in red are additions since the last audit plan was approved. All of these in red that you see were based on our risk assessment. And I know that Lieutenant Governor Marshall had a request to amend this plan to add. Heather, could you please remind us what that one was, Lieutenant Governor Marshall?
Yes, this is Kate Marshall, Lieutenant Governor. It was to add the issue of rent assessments by buildings and grounds.
Okay. Will you call that out? Okay.
So the motion would be to approve the audit plan for fiscal year 2021 to be amended as presented to include the rent, a look at the rent assessment that is assessed by buildings and grounds.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah, but I think it's called, Warren, you might be able to help. I think it's called the rent calculation. Is that right?
For the record, Warren Lohman, yes, Lieutenant Governor, and we'll make it broad enough that any definition we'll get to it all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have a motion in that regard?
Yes, this is Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall. I would like to make the motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 proposed, or I guess 2021 proposed audits with the amendment that it includes an audit of BNI, buildings and grounds rent calculation in the manner in which the audit division would word that so that it encompasses our concerns.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Judy DeLong, I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 11, committee member comments. I know I've kept you a long time here, way over what we expected. Does any committee member have a comment?
Thank you all for the great jobs you're doing.
Yep, we appreciate you. Thank you. Item number 12 is public comment, second time. Anyone wishing to address the board on any item, please step forward, identify yourself for the record, and comments be limited to 3 minutes. Do we have anybody in person in Carson City? I see a lot of chairs empty behind you. Nobody?
None in Carson, sir.
We have nobody in person in Las Vegas. Do we have anybody on the phone or any written public comment? None? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. We're adjourned. Thanks for your patience today.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.